My name is Gary Smith. I've been married for 25 years, and I'm currently sitting at the head table at my son's wedding. I feel out of place in a hired suit and tuxedo. My job as a warehouse manager means I can wear whatever I like, but I prefer not to wear a suit. I feel awkward in it. My son, David, is currently dancing with his fiancée, a beautiful girl named Anna. They are both 22 years old. My wife and I were married at the same age. I have no idea where my wife Carrie is right now. The last time I saw her was over an hour ago. She was frantically talking to a coworker from work. I think he invited himself. And she didn't seem happy about his presence. Everyone in the room looked in surprise at the man in question, Steve Walker, the director of sales where he and my wife work. He was trying to get my wife on the dance floor and wanted to dance with her. I got the impression he was under the influence of something. I don't know how he got into the audience, but I will talk to the organizers in the near future. It was obvious that my wife didn't want him there and didn't want anyone to know who he was. She was frantically looking to me for help. Even though I was furious, I couldn't let him ruin her mood in public. He was very surprised when I stood up, walked over to him and punched him in the face with my fist, then in the stomach, and then brought my knee up and kicked him in the balls. I then dragged him, moaning and groaning, outside and threw him into the pond right in front of the hall entrance. He looked very embarrassed, crawled out of the pond and, still in pain, got into his car and drove away. Carrie, my wife, ran outside to get some fresh air. My wife is the same age as me, 44. I am stocky, 6 feet tall, with short-cropped gray hair. My son resembles me in looks and has my personality. After applauding my actions, everyone went back to celebrating the wedding. There were questions, but I brushed them off, saying he was just an unwanted guest. My daughter, Mary, looks like her mother, short, with curves and long black hair. I looked at her and her friends in the corner of the room, who were laughing and joking about something, perhaps my actions. She must have sensed me looking in her direction, apologized, and picked up her bridesmaid dress and walked over to the table. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Daddy, what are you doing here alone?" she said, looking around, obviously looking for her mother. I picked up my half-empty beer glass, which had been standing half-empty for the past hour. "Your mother is somewhere else. She went outside to get some air after seeing her boyfriend beaten up and taken away. Once this is over, we'll talk. And if I don't like the answers, unfortunately those papers in the envelope will be given to your mother." I saw her face droop. "Dad, seriously? Just today?" "It's not— Mary, I'm sorry, but I've been trying to get your mother to give me honest answers, but she hasn't been honest with me yet, while I, on the other hand, have been very honest with her. Dad, she loves you. She wouldn't give up your marriage for a little pleasure with another man." "Mary, I'm glad you're so optimistic. For 2 weeks, your mother allegedly went out with friends from work. In reality, she has been having dates with a man I threw out on the street, with dinner and dancing." Mary looked shocked. "Dad, how do you know about this?" "One night last week, she came home much later than expected and she was drunk. She just undressed and fell asleep on the bed without apologizing or recognizing me. She smelled like aftershave, but not mine." I paused for a moment and took a sip of my beer. "Then one night this week, she did the same thing. Your aunt and her friend brought her home. She was very upset and very drunk. Your aunt said that she and her friend saved your mother. When I asked your mom about it, she said she had a good time dancing with a few people, drank a little too much, and came home. But I know for a fact that it wasn't just dancing." Mary looked at me, then looked around for her mother. "Daddy, I'm going to go look for her, and when I find her, I'll find out what's going on. Dad, you're not cheating on Mom, are you? No late nights in the warehouse? No late nights at the pub you and Uncle John go to sometimes?" I took my daughter's hands in mine. "No, Mary, I would never cheat or disrespect your mother. I would only date another woman if I was no longer married. I'm not the one looking outside my marriage. I love your mother and thought she loved me, but I may be wrong." "Okay, Dad, I believe you, but I can't believe Mom could have cheated on you. Anyway, I'm going to put together a search party and find Mom." With those words, she stood up and gave me a hug and then went back to her friends. She talked to them and they all got up and dispersed around the room. I finally finished my beer and joined the search. It took me 15 minutes to find my wife. She was standing on the terrace at the back of the castle, looking out over the castle's rose garden where the wedding breakfast was being held. She looked lovely in a classic business suit. The skirt was just above her knees, and the jacket was tight around her upper body. The blouse she wore was low-cut, showing off her breasts. It was a bold blouse, and I didn't really approve of it. But on the other hand, the other women were wearing bolder outfits, so I shouldn't have been too concerned about it. The door creaked as I opened it, and she turned around and saw me. I could see that she had been crying, makeup dripping down her face, making it look like army camouflage paint. In one hand, she held an empty champagne flute. She turned to me. "Gary, I'm so sorry. I was being incredibly stupid. I almost threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." I stood next to her, but didn't touch her. "Did you have sex with him?" I said bluntly. "What? No, never. I wouldn't do that to you." She looked a little shocked that I was being so blunt. "So I'll ask again. Did you sleep with him?" Carrie rushed toward me and I almost caught her. "No, Gary, I didn't. He wanted me, and yes, I admit he touched my ass a couple of times and we kissed on the lips. I remember he even tried to do it the last time we went out, but someone tipped a glass of water over us. It was, of course, your sister Diane. She was at the same club. Dave was obviously trying to seduce me, and I foolishly let myself get drunk. Luckily for me, she saved me from my own stupidity, and of course, your sister saved me from my brain malfunctioning again. Good thing she was there to save me, and also to kick the bastard's ass. Yeah, my sister took some pictures of you and him last week and this week. A couple pictures of you dancing, a couple pictures after you got doused with water, and 2 pictures of you punching him in the face. And she followed you and him last week. That's when she really saved you. You owe her a great debt of gratitude." "Yes, Gary, it was that night that woke me up. I shouldn't have let Steve talk me into going out with him. I disrespected you, and I'm sorry. It's all on my conscience. You were a great husband to me and a good father to our children." I guess I overlooked that. I should have known you wouldn't tolerate me hitting on someone else. Honestly, I had no idea what he was thinking coming here today. She hugged me really tight, as if she thought this was the end of our marriage. "Carrie, listen. I have divorce papers in this envelope. They say we split everything equally and move on with our lives. The kids know this and are still going to communicate with you and be involved in your life. But they have a hard time understanding why you almost cheated on me. Well, actually, you cheated on me emotionally. Am I such an asshole that I lost your love? Was I so bad at making love to you that you looked elsewhere for it?" She suddenly straightened up. "Gary, don't ever say anything like that again. I never thought you were an ogre. You've always satisfied me in bed. You're a caring, loving father and husband. Yes, your ideas are a bit out of step with modern thinking, but that's just the way you are. I wouldn't change you for anything. I'm just sorry I let things get this far and hurt you and our children." "I mean, is he the only one?" She looked shocked. "Yes, Gary, he's the only man besides you that has ever touched me. From now on, it will always be just you, if you can forgive me." "So you didn't sleep with him?" "No. Did he touch you through your clothes while you were dancing? Also, did he stroke and touch your ass during the dance and at any other time?" She looked at the ground and said quietly, "Yes, he touched me." "Okay. This is your last chance to be honest with me. If you lie to me, I'll give you this package and we'll be divorced in 6 months. Is there anything else you need to tell me?" I could see her contemplating what to say. "Okay, stop thinking," said I impatiently. At that moment, my sister appeared with her daughter and our son. Diane approached us carrying some pictures in her hands. "Gary, I think your children need to be present for this. It may affect them in the future." My wife looked at the pictures uncertainly. I turned to my wife and asked again, "Is there anything you want to add before we look at the pictures?" My daughter clearly wanted to comfort her mother. My son just stood there with his arms crossed. He was waiting to see what would happen. Carrie looked at each of us, took a deep breath, and said, "Everyone, please accept my apologies. Over the past 2 weeks, I had forgotten that I have a beautiful family and a loving, caring husband. And yes, a loving daughter-in-law." Diane smiled briefly. Carrie continued, "I let that mouthy asshole distract me from what I had. I will say, however, that besides being touched by my clothes and groping my ass, I swear to you all, to the best of my knowledge, for 2 nights with this asshole, we just drank and danced. Nothing else happened, thanks to Diane. And knowing how much I've hurt everyone here, I deeply regret my action, and I promise to be a better mother, a better wife, a better daughter-in-law to all of you." She paused and sighed very uncertainly. "Okay, Diane, show us pictures of what happened. I'm ready to face whatever you all throw at me." With those words, she rushed back to me and started sobbing again. Diana cleared her throat. "Carrie, I admit I'm mad at you for letting yourself get into this mess. And if those pictures had shown me anything to incriminate you, I would have hit you so hard you wouldn't have recovered for a week. However, it sounds like you're telling the truth. The nights you were with that jerk, all you did was drink and dance, and whenever he got near your clothes, you kept him at a distance. Yes, I know I helped, and yes, you owe me a lot." Diane held out some pictures to me that showed a couple dancing next to each other, presumably to a slow song, but nothing else. Next was a picture of them closer together. He had his hand on my wife's ass. Diane paused for a moment. "Gary, in your wife's defense, she kept moving his hand, even in her drunken state." She then showed a picture of them in a booth at the club. It was obvious that my wife was drunk and looked out of it. Diane then showed me a picture of the asshole looking around and seeing my sister taking a picture of him with her phone. The next couple pictures showed him approaching my sister. The next couple of photos showed him curled up in pain, just after my sister punched him in the face, stomach, and balls. My sister teaches self-defense at a college nearby, so she probably knows how to hold her own. Diane then showed me a video of my wife, very drunk, staggering towards this asshole. She fell on top of him and accidentally kicked him in the balls. Diane and her friend helped my wife up. That was the end of the video. Diane and her friend brought my wife home that same night. That was last week. Diane told me that my wife had no contact with this asshole until today, and as far as she knows, his appearance at the wedding was a surprise. David remained silent throughout the entire interrogation. Finally, he looked at his mother. "Mom, I see a woman who forgot about her family and husband for the sake of 2 nights of fun, and thanks to Aunt Diane, no harm was done except embarrassing you. So you're still my mother, but I'm going to help Daddy look after you, and I'll use this to have a chat with my wife." With those words, he gave his mother a brief hug and walked out into the hallway. Mary then said, "I agree with David. You are on probation. One slip-up on your part, and David and I will stick with Dad. You will lose everything and everyone in our family." She hugged Mom, and she and her sister went into the house, leaving us alone. "Carrie, listen carefully. I love you and always will. I never had any reason to doubt your love for me until the last few weeks. Just so you know, I want you to quit your job and find another one. Of course, I want you to stay away from that asshole. I want this to be once and for all. I won't follow you day and night, and I won't personally follow you everywhere." I took a pause to gather my thoughts. "These papers will remain in plain sight, and if you ever consider looking elsewhere for something extra that I'm not giving you in our marriage, you must sign the papers. Do you understand?" Tears were streaming down my wife's face. She nodded and then said softly, "Gary, I understand everything you are saying. I understand that you don't trust me, and I promise that I will always talk to you. I will never deceive you or our family again. I love you, Gary, and I always will. I will prove to you that I can be trusted. And Gary, you can keep the papers, but I promise you won't need them." Then she put her arms around me and kissed me on the lips. I took her hand and looked around the hall, then looked at the walled garden. An idea popped into my head. "Carrie, be honest. Isn't our sex life too boring? If you're asking me if I want a little more excitement in our lovemaking, then yes, I would. But you've always satisfied me, and I would never use that as an excuse to cheat on you." I took my wife's hand and pulled her into the walled garden. Closing the wicket, I turned her to me and pulled her to me, kissing her firmly on the lips. As we both climaxed, we kissed and held each other. Carrie cried and said that she was sorry and that she had really made a promise to me. She said she realized that my trust and faith in her had been severely damaged, but she promised to do everything she could to regain my trust. And she would do her best to win back our family's trust, and more importantly, to win back our children's trust. She also told me to keep the divorce papers if at any time she was tempted to back out, she would tell me and sign the papers. After showering, we changed into our casual clothes. I in a shirt and pants, Carrie in a simple summer dress. It accentuated her curves very nicely, and I had to admit that she looked beautiful. As we walked down the hall toward the auditorium, she took my hand. As we entered the hall, many people turned around to look at us. Our children and their friends smiled as they saw us holding hands. We walked over to the main table, and both of our children came over to us. My son said, "Daddy, you've been gone for an hour. What have you been doing?" He knew exactly what we had been doing. We both spoke at the same time. Reconnect. Epilogue. We danced, drank, laughed, and at one point my wife and daughter got up on the DJ remote and sang. At some point early in the morning, my son and his wife, my daughter and her boyfriend, me, Carrie, and my son's wife's parents decided to call it a night. We all dispersed to our bedrooms, and I understand the castle was rattling that night. The next day, all the guests gathered to have breakfast with the wedding party, and then the bride and groom left. I noticed that my daughter was having a private conversation with her mother. I asked David what was going on, but he didn't seem to know either. Finally, breakfast was over, and the guests began to pack up to leave. My wife, however, supported by my daughter and new daughter-in-law. They went up to the dais where the DJ had a mixing desk. Carrie looked around and cleared her throat several times. "Ladies and gentlemen, before you leave, I want to say something. First of all, you are all friends and family here. You know me and my wonderful husband. You also know that we have been very happily married for a long time. You also know my husband's views on marriage and fidelity." The guests fell silent and everyone sat down again, waiting to see what my wife would say. She took a deep breath and exhaled. 2 weeks ago, I did something very stupid. I agreed to go on a date with a man who is not my husband. I didn't tell him because I knew he wouldn't approve or allow me to date another man. I was drunk that night, probably because the asshole kept buying me drinks and making sure I drank them. But thanks to Diane's friend, I was somehow able to realize that something could happen that I would regret. This friend later told me that I was acting like a teenager in heat, and the man I was with was touching and kissing me. I didn't respond to his kisses and touches, but to my eternal shame, I didn't stop them. If it hadn't been for Diana's friend who stepped in and pulled me away from him, I honestly don't know what might have happened. She paused again, wiped her eyes, and looked directly at me. Last week, my brain stopped working and I went on a second date. I went to see him again, I don't know why myself. This time I got even more drunk, and again I let my potential seducer touch me and dance with me, and I'll be honest, in my drunken state I let him kiss me and touch me through my clothes. He clearly wanted more, but according to Diane, I kept stopping him. I guess even in my drunken state I had my limits, paradoxically. Tears were streaming down my wife's face. I looked around and saw sympathy, empathy, and embarrassment on the faces of the guests, as well as anger on the faces of some of the guests. Diane saved me from something more than touching and dancing. Thank you, Diana, from the bottom of my heart. My sister looked embarrassed, but smiled and nodded to my wife. When things started to literally spiral out of control, Diane saved me. If she had gotten involved with Gary, I'm sure he would have killed or seriously maimed Steve and gone to jail. However, Diana poured a pint of water on both of us and then proceeded to beat him to a pulp. I'm sure he's very ashamed of that. I am again indebted to her and her friends for helping me get home. I confess to all of you what a stupid idiot I was. I could claim temporary insanity, but that would only be an excuse. I can't undo what I did. I wish I could go back in time and tell Steve to fuck off, but I can't. What I will do is swear allegiance to my family, my husband, and my new extended family that I will never do anything so stupid again. Gary has prepared divorce papers if I ever disrespect my husband or family again. The papers will be filed, I will sign them, and walk away with nothing. Now, my friends, family, and most importantly, my husband, I apologize to you. With those words, she walked over to me, knelt down in front of me, took my hands, and looked into my eyes. Gary, my love, I'm so sorry. I promise to never hurt you again. I swear on our children's lives, you are the only man for me. And like I said, this body is yours. You can do whatever you want to me as long as it doesn't hurt me. Carrie, Be careful what you wish for. Yes, I forgive you, but forgive yourself too. I don't want you hanging around idly like an obedient creature, waiting on me hand to mouth. If you screw up again, it'll be on your conscience. So yes, you're forgiven, but I won't forget. And my trust will be hard to earn, but so far you're doing fine." With those words, I helped her up, hugged and kissed her. The guests and relatives seemed to approve, and David and Mary came up to me for a hug. The ceremony and wedding were over, but my marriage was not over, at least not yet. Who knows what might happen in the next 20 years? The couple was still married 20 years later. Yes, Carrie earned Gary's trust after all. She never drank to excess again and only went out at family functions with her family and Gary. Yes, sometimes she went out alone for errands or groceries, but she always kept in touch with Gary on her cell phone. Her phone was always charged and always on. For the first few years, Carrie insisted that Gary have a phone locator. Carrie did not leave the company, but after she told her supervisor what had happened, she was transferred to another department in the company. Steve was reprimanded and demoted. He went from being a director to being the director in charge of the post office. He was the only employee in the post office. He lasted 6 months and then left the company. No, he didn't try to contact Carrie. Perhaps a visit from 3 large men who turned out to be friends of Mary and David convinced him to look elsewhere for entertainment. Carrie insisted on having a tracking device installed in her car. Whenever she had to leave on business, she was sure Gary knew where she was. Carrie never cheated again. Yes, men asked her out on dates or to dance when she and Mary, Diane, and Anna went out together, but they only danced as a group and never separately. So, after that little drama, life went on.